What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're finally going to get to check out a pair of QAcoustics speakers. This is the 5010 series. Now look, I don't know if it's supposed to be 5010, 5010, or 5010, but I'm saying 5010 because it just rolls off the tongue a lot better. I met the guys from Fidelity Imports at Exponent. They're the distributor for QAcoustics, and they were gracious enough to send me this review sample, so special thank you for that. You guys have asked me for years to check out QAcoustics, and I don't know why I've never checked them out. Maybe I've just been busy with other stuff, but I'm happy I finally got my hands on these bad boys. We'll do this review the same way we generally do. I'll throw the main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about some cool standout features. I'll tell you what the speakers sound like. And to give context to that, I'll also tell you how they compare to other speakers in and around their price category. I'll tell you if I have any complaints. I'll tell you who I think they're for, maybe who they're not for, and then we'll wrap up the video. So, by the way, you might hear an ambulance or a fire truck in this video. We got Hurricane Hillary going on right now, we're gonna keep filming. We're not gonna stop. We're not gonna edit it. You guys know I do single takes and I don't edit my videos. So let's get into it. Standout features. I always knew QAcoustics took their cabinet work very seriously, they absolutely do. When I handled this thing and I gave it like a little tap, I was surprised by how inert the cabinets were. You can look up more of that stuff on their website if you're interested in the tech behind it and what exactly they do, but they take their cabinet construction very seriously and it shows. Another thing that I thought was cool, and this second one doesn't necessarily impact sound, but I like to see stuff like this. Most speaker companies, even including speakers that cost a few $1,000s, are going to use off-the-shelf binding posts. And look, there's nothing wrong with that, but I love it when I see a speaker use a custom binding post that they made themselves. And here you can see it's super flush. It barely sticks out. The speaker comes with port plugs also, so if for any reason you want to get this thing almost all the way against the wall, I mean, you use that port plug, you use bare wire speaker wires, and you can get this thing all the way against the wall if you need to do that for some reason. Now, obviously, for the best sound, you want to give them a little bit of space, as with all speakers, but you do have that option if you need it. Another standout feature is going to be the two-tone finish. I think it looks super cool. All the colors are going to be two-tone except the black, obviously, because the black finish on the outside of the speaker is going to match the black front baffle. These speakers really caught my eye at Exponent because of this light wood finish and the little bezel around it. I thought it was just a nice, unique look. So look, those are the standout features. Let me tell you what it sounds like, and then we'll jump into those comparisons. I know you guys like that. Starting with the top end, we got a treble presentation that is going to be on the forward side of neutral. It's going to project into the room in a forward manner. And what I mean by that is, with a lot of speakers, most speakers I would say, it's going to sound like your music is coming right off the front baffle. With the QAcoustics 5010, from the upper mid-range up all the way up to the treble, that region sounds like it's about a foot forward projected into the room, which is nice because it gives a sense of holographics to the sound, which is enjoyable. I've heard a lot of other guys that own like Dolly's or Bowers & Wilkins talk about that type of effect. They really enjoy it. So there certainly are other speakers that have a similar presentation, but definitely wanted to mention that. If you're looking for a sound that's coming just directly off the front baffle and not projecting into the room, just more like just a flat sound stage, this isn't that, right? I found the treble to be open and expansive. And look, if you've got baby ears, if you've got really sensitive ears, you don't like a lot of treble, this might not be the best move for you. These are going to sound like you take a dead neutral speaker, you do like +2 on your tone controls. That's about the amount of treble I would say you have. The quality of it overall, though, is very good and respectable for the price category. Moving down to the mid-range, we've got a mid-range region that's mostly neutral. And when a speaker's mid-range is neutral, there's not a whole lot to talk about. It's not warm, rich, and lush. It's not cool, dry, or analytical. It is neutral. Moving down to the bass, there's no mid-bass bump. I'm happy about that. Mid-bass bumps make it hard to pair with subwoofers. The bass is very linear. And for a 4.5-inch driver, I'd even call it very respectable. Look, it's not a Bucard S400. It's not a CSS Crichton 1TD. It's not a Dynaudio Special 40. It's not a bass monster. It's a small, compact 4.5-inch speaker. But the amount of bass that it has is fairly respectable. Now, I did use subwoofers half the time for my listening sessions. And what I found is the speaker's very flexible in terms of what subwoofers you connect. You want that more clean and airy, SQ first presentation. You're going to pair it with something like a REL T7X or a Rhythmic F12. You want that more heavy-handed in your face presentation. You certainly can pair it with an SVS or JL Audio. You want something more in the middle. You can pair it with like an Arundel 1723 1S, right? Or a KEF KC62. Whatever subwoofer you want to use, with this speaker, it's going to sound pretty good and it's going to be compatible. Not all speakers are like that, so I definitely wanted to mention that. Some speakers, very picky with what kind of subwoofer you pair with them, not the QAcoustics 5010s. Anyhow, I digress. I've told you what the speaker sounds like, here's a simple takeaway. A little bit forward in the treble region, very neutral in the mid-range, bass, fair for the size. But that doesn't tell you a whole lot without context. And the context is going to be the comparisons I'm about to do for you and help you understand how the speaker competes and performs against other speakers in and around this price category. Let's start with the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G. That speaker is $725, putting it $25 cheaper than the QAcoustics 5010. I consider that basically the same price. Oh, by the way, these do have optional stands if you're into that kind of thing. I think they're about $230, which is very fair for matching stands in my opinion. Oftentimes I see brands kind of really mark those things up. I don't like that. Back to the comparison. Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G has a treble region that is also on the forward side of neutral. I'll say the QAcoustics is just a little bit more on the forward side of neutral. The Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G's treble, by direct comparison, is simply not as high quality as the QAcoustics. The Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G is a fine speaker in a vacuum, but its treble could be just a little bit dry, a little bit gritty, a little bit lacking in overall refinement. The QAcoustics 5010 doesn't have that problem. It's very clean, it's very clear, it's resolute, it projects forward into the room. The Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G is more just coming off the front baffle. Moving down to the mid-range of the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G is going to be a little bit lean and cool, whereas the QAcoustics 5010 is mostly neutral. That's the difference there. Moving down to the bass region, you'd expect the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G to have tremendously more bass with its 8-inch driver than the 4.5-inch driver of the QAcoustics 5010. And look, it does have more bass, whether it's extension or quantity, but not a whole lot more quantity. The Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G, I don't know why Monitor Audio tuned it to have such light bass despite having such a large driver. It extends low. It'll get down to like 28 hertz. Not a lot of oomph to it down there, but it'll get that low. But it's not very powerful bass for some reason. So while it is more, it's not tremendously more, but the speaker is roughly 2.5 times the size. So take that with a grain of salt. Overall, I would say the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G is a fantastic speaker for anyone who's looking to put together a sound system that's going to be for TV use. Watch Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll, stuff like that. Dialogue intelligibility is your number one priority. That's really where the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G is going to excel. Its dialogue clarity is outstanding. But for the rest of us that want to listen to music and care about all those other things, the QAcoustics 5010, in my opinion, is going to be the clear winner. Let's talk about the ELAC DBR62. That's a speaker that's $700. It was one of my favorite speakers for a long time. In fact, I bought them twice, but that's another story. The ELAC DBR62 is a good speaker. The treble region is going to be a little bit kind of like the Monitor Audio Bronze 100 6G, where on its own it's fine. In a vacuum it's fine, but by direct comparison, when you compare it to the QAcoustics 5010, you're going to feel it's just a little bit lacking in refinement. It can be just a little bit gritty at times. Not enough to ruin anything. It's, the DBR62 is still a good speaker. It's just, this is by comparison. So the treble on the DBR62, mostly neutral. QAcoustics 5010 is going to be on the forward side of neutral. It's going to have quite a bit more treble energy, presence. Treble is going to project into the room more. It's going to almost, by direct comparison, the QAcoustics is almost going to sound like a top-end focused presentation compared to something like the ELAC DBR62, which is more almost dead neutral from top to bottom. Moving down to the mid-range of the ELAC DBR62 is actually quite good. It's a little bit on the warmer side of neutral. It's a little bit more like tonally rich and things like that. It's a very enjoyable mid-range. I think it's fantastic. The QAcoustics 5010, again, is more neutral. I would say for the mid-range, a little bit of a win goes to the ELAC DBR62. Moving down to the bass, the ELAC DBR62 is an interesting speaker with bass. Some songs, hardly any bass at all. Other songs are going to sound very full and confident. Something they did with that port tuning on that cabinet of the DBR62 causes the speaker to be a little bit inconsistent with its bass delivery. Again, some songs you're going to be like, oh, I'm not even sure I need a subwoofer. And other songs you're going to be like, why does it sound so thin? It doesn't make sense to me. I would say the bass is a wash. The QAcoustics 5010 versus the ELAC DBR62, it's kind of this simple in my book. I think the ELAC DBR62 is a good speaker. It is. I like it a lot. Like I said, I bought it twice. I think the 5010 is going to be a win for a lot of people because here's the thing. The DBR62 is quite large. Not as large as the Monitor Audio Bronze 106G, but it is fairly large and it doesn't really do much more. Its mid-range is better. That's it. Its mid-range is a little bit better, but the QAcoustics is a smaller speaker. It's $50 more. It looks a lot nicer. It's going to sound a lot more clean and clear overall. And if for some reason you're like, hey, but I want that more neutral treble of the DBR62, you can just use tone controls and turn the treble down a tiny bit, and you have much higher quality treble in the QAcoustics 5010. So what else? Someone on my community section asked, oh, you guys wanted to know about the Arundel 1961 bookshelf and how that compares. So that speaker's $50 more at $800. Whoa, the rain is really starting to come down. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can hear it. It's kind of tripping me out. Arundel 1961 bookshelf. I love that speaker. It is phenomenal. It is very, very small. Let's remember that. Its front baffle is about the same size as the QAcoustics 5010, but it only goes back a few inches. Like the QAcoustics 5010 is like 3 times as deep than the very shallow Arundel 1961 bookshelf. Let's do the comparison though to give you guys that context. The Arundel 1961 bookshelf is a speaker that is almost all about neutrality. It is a very neutral speaker from top to bottom. So of course the QAcoustics 5010 is going to have more treble energy. It's going to project forward into the room more and things like that. The mid-range of both speakers is fairly neutral. Moving down to the bass, you know, look, the Arundel 1961, it's a small sealed speaker. It's not going to have a ton of bass at all. The QAcoustics 5010 does have more bass. Sound staging is where the two speakers start to become different. The Arundel 1961 bookshelf, one thing it did incredibly well was just how wide, tall, and deep it's staged. There were certain songs where it sounded like the singer was right in my face with those speakers. There were other songs where it sounded like the singer was a little bit further back and sometimes right in the middle of the room. What the 1961 bookshelf could do with depth was absolutely amazing for the price category, and I loved it. I'll tell you this, between those two speakers, it's tough to call it. If you're doing a music-only system and you're definitely not going to add a subwoofer no matter what, and you like a sound that's going to be on the forward side of neutral, you may prefer the QAcoustic 5010s. But if you know you're going to be adding a subwoofer anyway, and you want a more neutral sound, the Arundel 1961 is pretty special. It's a little expensive for how small it is. I'm not going to lie. It is. It's built insanely well, and it's a very nice speaker. But I could see a lot of people going, man, $800, it's kind of a lot, you know? But Arundel's build quality really is just top notch. And I kind of get that. I would say between these, the Arundel 1961 bookshelf and the QAcoustics 5010, it's a wash as far as which one is better. The sound is just very different. Again, with the QAcoustics having that more energetic top end that's going to project forward into the room more, where the Arundel is more mostly neutral, instead focusing on soundstage imaging being a very expansive sound overall. Let's do one last comparison and then we'll wrap up the video. Let's talk about the Dyne Audio EMIT 10. That's $800, so about $50 more than the QAcoustics 5010. Both speakers on the forward side of neutral. The Dyne Audio EMIT 10's attack in its treble region is soft, despite being a bright speaker. It's an interesting combination of things Dyne Audio did there. The QAcoustics 5010 is not going to be sharp, nor is it going to be soft with its attack, very neutral. The QAcoustics 5010 is just slightly brighter than the Dyne Audio EMIT 10. Moving down to the mid-range, the Dyne Audio EMIT 10 is a very bass-boosted speaker. It's got very, very strong, confident bass, despite being almost the same size as the QAcoustics 5010. So it's going to have a much more colored mid-range. That bass is going to make that mid-range sound a little bit juicier, a little bit more romantic, and things like that. It is not what I would call a neutral affair. If you like a little bit more flavor in your mid-range, you might like the Dyne Audio EMIT 10. The QAcoustics 5010, again, very neutral in the mid-range. Moving down to the bass region, look, I already told you, Dyne Audio EMIT 10 is a bass-boosted speaker. It's going to have a whole lot more bass than the QAcoustics 5010. As far as which speaker's better, I would say, again, this isn't a wash. This is not, there's no one's better than the other here. It's just going to be, if you want the treble that is a little bit more reserved and you want that little bit more romantic mid-range and that more boosted bass, you're going to go for the Dyne Audio EMIT 10. You want that more, the treble that's going to project into the room more and mostly neutral from the mid-range on down, you may prefer the QAcoustics 5010. Now, with that said, that's 4 comparisons I've done. That's kind of a lot. We're going to stop there. Let me tell you who I think this is for. Just the ideal buyer. Anyone who owns a pair of like older Dollies or Bowers & Wilkins, or even something newer like the Canto U's, like the passives, and you want to upgrade, you know, especially the Cantos, because like the Cantos sound like a really, really cheap version of these. And it's funny because they have that kind of like rounded cabinet too. If you have the Canto U's, guys, and you like those speakers, you know they're not the best though because they're only $200. You know the treble is, you know, not very refined. You know that mid-range is a little too dry and it has no bass at all. But you like the general character and you want something that's like 10 times better of an upgrade, but a similar sound. The QAcoustics 5010 is going to satisfy you. But again, also for anyone that owns like older Bowers & Wilkins Dolly speakers, those were known to be a little bit more energetic in the top region and have that treble presentation that kind of projected a foot off that front baffle. I've talked to a lot of guys like that actually. They own like older Dollies and Bowers & Wilkins and they're like, they complain that like other speakers don't satisfy them because they don't have that. Well, here you go. QAcoustics 5010 does it for you. Who I think they're not for, anyone who likes a darker sound. Anyone who prefers a speaker like the Hecko Aurora, the CSS Crichton 1TD, the Buchart S400. If you like those kinds of speakers that are on the darker side of neutral, you're obviously not going to like a speaker that's going to be more energetic with the treble region. Well, I suppose there definitely could be people out there that like both. I think most people have a preference one way or the other though. Ultimately, I'd say this about the QAcoustics 5010. If the sound characteristics are to your liking, I think it's a fantastic speaker and I think you're going to like it quite a bit. It's built well, it looks fantastic, and it's reasonably priced. What more could you want? And on top of that, there's different sizes. There's the larger bookshelf, there's the tower. If I didn't already tell you, Andrew Robinson reviewed the tower if you want to check that out. And they're all reasonably priced. So there you go. Criticisms. Don't really have any. Yeah, I don't. And you know, I could sit here and tell you like, oh, I wish it wasn't so energetic because personally I like a darker sound, but I could just use tone controls if I really needed to, right? So that's even not really a criticism. I would say the voicing of a speaker is almost never something I'd criticize because I learned a long time ago. It was when I reviewed the Dolly Oberon 1. That was a very spicy speaker. Hell, let's talk about it in relation to this real quick. We'll do a 5th comparison for you guys. The Dolly Oberon 1, on the forward side of neutral, much like the QAcoustics 5010, except that Dolly Oberon 1 is even more on the forward side of neutral. Its attack is going to be sharp, where the QAcoustics 5010 is more neutral with its attack. As far as overall treble energy, the Dolly Oberon 1 is definitely going to be more aggressive of a speaker. Both speakers have, you know, good high quality treble, don't get me wrong, but the Dolly Oberon 1 is going to attack you with it a little bit. Moving down in the mid-range, the Dolly Oberon 1, it's going to be a little bit like more romantic, whereas the QAcoustics 5010 is going to be a little bit more linear. And moving down to the bass, the Dolly Oberon 1, I'll say this about it, really good bass texture and tone. That wood cone thing they use sounds really good. Between the two speakers, I'd say this, if you want the sharpest treble, you're going to like the Oberon 1. If you don't want that super sharp treble, but you still like it to be a little energetic, you're going to like the QAcoustics 5010. God, am I going to do a 6th comparison right now? I guess I have to mention Bowers & Wilkins 6 series. I have to. I was going somewhere with that Dolly comparison, though. What I was trying to tell you is this. When I reviewed that Dolly speaker, I thought it was way too bright. I criticized it for that. Then I talked to people in the comments section. They're like, hey, I saw your review. I know you didn't like that speaker, but I own it, and like, yes, it's energetic, but that's the sound I like, right? There's tons of people that like that. It's the same with the Bowers & Wilkins 6 series. There's a ton of people that like that treble. And that Bowers & Wilkins 6 series, that's a bright speaker. Let's compare it to this real quick, and then we'll really wrap up the video. So the Bowers & Wilkins 607 S2, that is very well known as one of the brightest speakers out there today. It's a lot brighter than the QAcoustics 5010. The QAcoustics 5010 almost might sound reserved by direct comparison. Both speakers have that treble presentation that is going to project out into the room and feel like it's kind of floating in the air, a little bit holographic, really nice. The biggest difference between the two speakers is this, though. The Bowers & Wilkins is very bass boosted, so it's going to have a lot fuller bass. It could get in the way of the mid-range here and there, whereas the QAcoustics 5010 does not have boosted bass. It's more linear. Its mid-range is more open and clear and neutral. So as far as should you get the Bowers & Wilkins 607 S2, if you want the most treble available, just the brightest sound, to me, the 607 S2 is That's what that is. The treble quality is very good on the Bowers and Wilkins. There's just so much of it. I personally couldn't get through more than like half a song. The QAcoustics 5010 is a little bit of a tame version of that, not a neutral affair. Again, just to be clear, but it's a much more tame version. So I hope that helps, guys. That brings this video to a close for the most part. This YouTube channel does have a free Discord. If there's anything I didn't cover in this video, feel free to ask in the comments section below. And until next time, later.